let's curse splat our way into another episode of Batman. Hey everyone, welcome to Princess Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we're here with episode 8, I believe? Yes, of Batman Caped Crusader. And last time we had Onomatopoeia, a really obscure villain from the comics who I guess appeared in some other media as well, who speaks mostly through onomatopoeias. Basically, the verbalized sound effects of objects and actions and whatnot. And there were other villains, and Onomatopoeia was honestly just a hitman. It's like he was working for who the true enemy of the episode was. But there was also a lot of focus on Barbara, on Gordon, on the police in general. Renee Montoya had some good focus. It was another one of those episodes that really just went to that side of things. Now, I want to address something with this series because I've heard a lot of people saying on social media in the recent week or two, I've heard some people saying that they have issue with the fact that Batman himself doesn't seem to be as constantly prevalent in this series. The idea that other characters are kind of taking screen time from him. Characters like Montoya and Barbara and whatnot. And getting to see even the perspectives of the villains. And I've seen some people complaining, not a lot, mind you, but I've seen some people complaining that with this series, for it being named Batman Caped Crusader, you just don't get a lot of Batman. And you focus too much on the other stuff. And my thoughts when hearing people say this, or I guess seeing people have typed this out, my thoughts about that are, who cares? When people watched Batman the Animated Series, they were watching for the villains. They weren't even watching for Batman in the first place. In fact, that's most of the time when someone watches a piece of Batman media, they're not watching for Batman. They're either watching for the villains, or if it's a crossover thing, they're watching to see how Batman specifically interacts with others, but not for Batman being Batman. And with who Batman's character is, I actually think it works better for Batman, at least in a multi-season series in the first season, to be more mysterious, to be not as heavily involved. It allows for each time he does come into play, whether it's action with fighting enemies or doing detective work, it makes it feel more exciting, more enticing. It's making you want to see more, which is the point. Which is what you should want this to do. And that way in future seasons, like the confirmed season 2 that we're getting, Batman can have more of a focus now, allowing him to feel like it's more earned, rather than just focusing on him beating up random criminals and taking away from some of the amazing depth we've been given with these characters and villains. I think one of the strongest parts of Caped Crusader is its character work. The way it's handling its antagonists, the way it's handling its side characters. And you could say, yeah, Batman doesn't get as much screen time as you would think. But that just allows other characters like Renee Montoya and Barbara Gordon to be that much better. These are fantastic representations of these characters because they get more screen time. They get time to shine, time to really be characters instead of having to be playing second fiddle to Bruce the entire time. I think this is a better way to handle it in a lot of cases. But it's just like the argument with Godzilla movies and everything. It's like, oh, I want Godzilla to be in more of the movie. It's like, no, you don't. You think you do because, more Godzilla means more cool monster action, right? But Godzilla is so exciting and impressive because he's not in a lot of the movie a lot of the time. Because you focus on the human characters a lot of the time, whenever Godzilla does show up, it makes it more impactful. It makes Godzilla's appearances and what is done during those appearances mean more. I mean, Godzilla Minus One had this balanced out well. Godzilla was not in as much of it as you would think. It focused a lot on just the humans. But whenever Godzilla appeared, oh, he owned the screen. But that wouldn't work if Godzilla was in there a lot more. That it would not work. It'd be oversaturated. You can have too much of a good thing. The same goes for the Beetlejuice movies. That's relevant right now. Beetlejuice does not have that much screen time. People were actually surprised, those who didn't grow up watching Beetlejuice, when they eventually watch Beetlejuice, especially a lot of reactors I've seen, they're surprised how little he's actually in the first movie. I've seen a lot of people really surprised by that. And it's like, yeah, he's not in the movie a lot. Because he's not the main character. Even though the movie's named after him, he's just the villain. The main characters are Lydia Dietz, Barbara, and Adam Maitland. Those three are the main characters. They're the ones the story revolves around. And with this series, you could say Bruce is not, in a way, the main character. I would actually say, if any one character were the main character, I would say it's Barbara. I know that sounds wild to say, but I think she comes across more as the main character. And I'm not saying this in a bad way, because people would hear that and say, oh, but shouldn't Batman be the main character of a Batman series? Depends on how you want to do it. Depends on how you want to portray Batman. This series is trying to portray the character of Batman as this mysterious figure who shows up every now and again, does vigilante work, sometimes helps out the police and whatnot, but is this mysterious, unknown entity. And by having Bruce not be the main character here, and having Batman's appearances be a little more sporadic, it actually sells that persona better. It sells the mysterious nature of Batman in this series much better. I think it's being done excellently. And like I've said, I don't know where this is going at this point, because I think outside of Two-Face, which is pretty much guaranteed at this point, I don't know anything else that's going to happen in this. I don't know what other villains might show up. I don't know. Because all the stuff that I knew about beforehand that I remember from the trailer and everything already happened. It's like, I have no idea where this is going. And I love that. Again, really sells the mystery, which this series very heavily goes into. I'm really glad with how they're doing this series. This is... I would definitely put this kind of up there in the same range as My Adventures with Superman in terms of modern DC stories being done really well. And I hope it sticks the landing. But we have some more episodes to go before we even get to the landing. So let's get into episode 8 and see what we get this time. Cutting in here real quick to remind you of all the awesome content we have on the channel. Between Monday and Friday, we have a plethora of awesome series reactions with 2 on Wednesday. We also have movie reactions every Saturday and Sunday. I do pre-record them during the week, but I upload them on the weekend. And don't forget all the gaming content we have both on this channel and the secondary Princess of Gaming channel. We have Horizon Forbidden West every other day and Baldur's Gate 3 every single day on this channel, while we also have Nier Automata every Saturday on the other. And don't forget to click the link down in the description below to get to today's reaction. I redirected just due to copyright reasons. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you want to see more awesome content such as this. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get on to the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So a couple things to talk about here. First off, so I looked up Natalia Knight, also known as Nocturna, in the comics and all. So this is an interesting character because she's actually had 2 different sets of powers depending on the continuity. 2 different entire identities, really, too. So, pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths, Natalia Knight was a homeless child who was adopted by Charles Knight. While working at the Gotham City Observatory, she was struck by a radioactive laser, which gave her pale skin and sensitivity to light. She then meets Charles' son Anton, who we see in here as her brother, who becomes a lover and ally to her. So she's adopted by this guy, and she ends up becoming a lover to her adopted brother, which is a little weird, but okay. Post-Crisis, her name was changed to Natalie Metternich, or Metternich, however you pronounce it. A former astronomer, so the astronomy part was kept, and member of the Injustice League, who can secrete a pheromone that causes those around her to become emotional and lose their inhibitions. So her name, her identity, her pretty much everything was changed. Her power set. Her powers seem to be a little different here, because her original powers are listed here as like teleportation and stuff, and she has the weakness to light and everything. But in this series, her powers are energy absorption. She's an energy vampire. And through absorbing energy, she gains superhuman strength. So a little bit different than the comics version, which is fine, mind you. As I say, I'm fine with them changing things as long as it still works and as long as it's not just a complete bastardization. So I'm fine with that. But yeah, it seems like she was also in the Batwoman series, the live-action Batwoman series. As well as, apparently, she was going to originally be in Batman the Animated Series. This is interesting. But Fox basically told them no because they objected to the storyline about the fact that she would have been vampiric and turned Batman into a vampire and he would crave blood and stuff. They objected to that. And they wanted to then try to do it in the new Batman Adventures, but WB, who was the home channel for that continuation of the Batman animated series, also said no. So they've wanted to include Natalia in here from the original animated series. Granted, it seems like she was going to be more like standard vampire there. But they finally got to include her now in this version as an energy vampire, which is, by the way, really a cool like version of this to do. Instead of making her like just a regular normal vampire, making her an energy vampire, I think almost works kind of better for this series. And having her affliction being kind of mysterious in this, like we don't know exactly what caused it. We don't know exactly like all the details surrounding it. But yeah, that's really interesting. And it's a tragic story too, with the fact that she ends up killing Anton. It's like there's some pretty like sad and dark layers to this. Also, the fact that all of the kids are the Robins, not all of the Robins, obviously, there was no Tim Drake, but the fact that all of them were Robins is great. Because all of these kids end up growing up to be a version of Robin. Um, I don't know if that's going to stick here. I don't know if that's going to end up happening in this series, but that would be interesting for sure. Because, I mean, they have the setup now. They're all orphans and all. Which I don't know if they all were in the original. Dick Grayson, I know, is. Um, is, uh, is Jason Todd normally an orphan? I think he is. As for Stephanie Brown and Carrie Kelly, I just actively do not know. But yeah, that's really interesting nonetheless. But there was one other thing I really wanted to talk about here, and that was the ending. Um, we saw the birth of Two-Face. And I believe in the comics, this is done slightly differently, but kind of has a similar start. He does get acid splashed in his face. That is what happens, but it's in the courtroom, I believe, normally, while he's, examining someone at the stand. So this happening in the restroom and all is, the actively different aspect of this. Um, Also, seeing it from Harvey's perspective, a lot of people might be like, "Oh, they just didn't want to show it yet and everything." And yeah, of course, but seeing it from his eye line is insane because it makes it feel like kind of more intense when you're seeing it from Harvey's perspective. That's wild. But I'm so glad that Harvey did choose to stand up for what was right and do the right thing. That he did choose to follow through on the case rather than drop it. Harvey's an interesting character in this. Because there's points where he is kind of a bit of a dick. But he also does show he is trying to help. He's trying to do good. He's not like a bad guy. He's just, you know, a little bit of an asshole sometimes. He feels very complex, like there's two sides to him, almost. He has the side of him that's kind of mean and rude at times, but then there's a side of him that is very kind and caring and genuinely wants to help. You get to see both sides of that in this episode alone. Like at the carnival. Like when he's like, when the woman comes up to him, it's like, Mr. Dent, we can't find these kids. It's like, it's a carnival, they're somewhere. And he just pushes aside to go because he's busy and stressed because he's going to meet with, Rupert. But then you see later on when he sees them on the bus, he's like, what are you all still doing here? And she's like, there's kids still missing. He's like, oh crap, I was busy. I'm sorry. Let me help you here. And he's like genuine, because he's not a bad guy. He's just two-faced. I think that's a good way to showcase his character. I know there's a lot of people who really like him, Harvey Dent, being like this white knight type of character beforehand, being very kind and, caring and just a lot more standardly good. But I actually like showing that he does have kind of that darkness to him beforehand. That he's not perfect. He isn't this white knight. He has complexity to him. I think that's actually better, personally. And we knew that this was building up to Two-Face. Two-Face is going to be the final main villain. The question is, are both of the final two episodes going to focus on that? Because this very much feels at this moment like Two-Face is coming next episode. But could they, wait an episode? I genuinely don't know. Maybe it will be a two-parter. I mean, that's very possible. But this also is kind of starting to make me feel like Harley's not coming back this season, which is a bit disappointing because it's like there was so much set up for her at the beginning, and then she debuted, and it's like such an iconic version of the character for a character who already is just usually iconic, and you don't even use her more than once really as Harley Quinn. It's like she's got to return in season 2 at least, at the very least. I understand you want to showcase a bunch of different villains and stuff and bunch of different ideas, but still. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited to see how they do Two Face here, because Two Face is just one of the most iconic Batman villains, and I really hope they pull it off. I also love how Killer Croc was in this just randomly as one of the carnival workers, which is fitting considering it makes sense. But at the same time, it's just like, oh, I was not expecting that. There was a lot of references in this. Probably more than I found. Probably a lot more than I found. Probably stuff in the background and stuff. I really like this episode for all the references it gave. For all of the characters that were shown in it. It is just a really fun idea and a really natural way to integrate a lot of that in. I feel it didn't come across as forced or like anything like that. It felt very natural, and I appreciate that. But even if you took all that out, just the stuff with Natalia, the energy vampire concept alone would have been enough, because that's just so cool. Energy vampires are just so cool. Like vampires are cool, but energy vampires, it's like you take something that's already super cool and make it so much more interesting. Because it's like, okay, vampire, sucks blood, has some powers, cool, 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 whatever. But energy vampire, that's unique. That's interesting. That's something I want to see more of, honestly. And they made her intimidating. Like when she's sucking the energy out of them, it's freaky as hell. Also, the fact that she's kind of almost become addicted to it and is only brought back down after she realizes she killed her brother. It's like, it feels like a kid. Like a kid, like having some semblance of power and latching onto it, becoming addicted to it. But then when she realizes she, killed the one person she cares about the most, it's like she broke down. There's a couple things in this that remind me of the Baby Doll episode of the first series of the animated series. And I say that with an insane amount of love, because that's still one of my favorite episodes of the original Batman the Animated Series. It's so goddamn good. It is such a good episode. And so the fact that there is multiple things in this that reminded me of that, from the Hall of Mirrors, it reminded me of the end of that episode, which makes me cry really, really badly. And you also have just, the concept of the little girl, even though Baby Doll's not a little girl, but, there's similarities. Plus, the breakdown at the end. There's some things that definitely reminded me of it. Of course, I would still love to see Baby Doll herself actually appear in this series, because that would be... And if they got the same VA, oh, that would be amazing. Because that VA, I don't remember who the VA is who played her in the animated series, but she is phenomenal. Like, she owned that role. If she's still, like, around and doing voice acting and they could get her back, like, that would be amazing. But yeah, so this was another really good episode. And I noticed that I didn't check last time what the title of the episode was for the last one, so I'm going to look up both of those last episodes. Or the last episode and this one. in terms of titles. Because, like I said, we had been doing that. So the last one, which was, oh God, what was the last one? Oh yeah. I blanked because I was thinking entirely of this episode. The last episode was the one with onomatopoeia and everything, and the hit out on Barbara, who and thinking it was originally on Gordon. That one was called Moving Target, which is a very fitting title for the episode because, the target of the hit is moving around trying to avoid, getting attacked and stuff. But I wouldn't have guessed what the episode was about. Most of these in that is the case of that. I wouldn't have guessed what the episode was about based on that title. Moving target. I might have guessed that it's like someone was being attacked, someone was being shot at, but that's about it. This one is called Nocturne, which is Natalia's name in the comics and stuff. So that makes sense, but again, I didn't know who this character was. Well, actually, it's Nocturne, but I wouldn't have guessed it. I wouldn't have known who the character was still, so wouldn't have guessed that. Based off the title Nocturne, I probably would have guessed it had something to do with, like, darkness. Which it kind of does, vaguely, just because, like, she can't go out in the sun and everything. But I wouldn't have guessed anything that actually happened in this from that title. So, yeah, we have 2 more episodes left. And I've been debating whether or not I'm going to end up doing them together. I probably am. Whether it ends up being a 2-parter or not, I think I am going to do them together just to finish the season off. So that's the plan for next week. We're going to get to both of those in the same video. But in the meantime, tell me what you thought of this episode of Batman Caped Crusader, and if there's anything I missed, which there probably is, any references I missed, anything that might be important even, please let me know. But obviously, no spoilers. Do not tell me what's going to happen next. No spoilers at all. So that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.